faut traverser. Il faut traverser.
And then we come to prep. Maybe you can be it's a boys only game. So what the fuck are we arguing about? I don't think that's something with you. Oh, why didn't you do it?
And I was like, oh, give me some probabilities here. And he was like, oh, 90% fine, 10%
finding it. Hey, David.
Ihn heb je gedaan?
Try looking up and not looking down.
I'm talking to myself. So, I literally thought you were looking at me.
No. I was like, I looked at your text and it went, heading for Cromwell Road entrance.
It's just crazy what your body all of a sudden
Claro. Ja, klar. ما تلقى مكان. Bravo Eva pour le choix. точно да се
It's next to Chelsea Methodist Hospital.
Alors, c'était tout le monde.
C'est quoi là, il filme?
Azt hiszem, Mashhad Park, vagy Engineering.
There will be different symbols for America. For correction. Nothing but color.
Oh, so it's not this way we go.
Or do you want to walk around the restaurant?
We're going up this way to the playground. We've seen the temple now. Pretty cool.
Ja, jag vet.
Har du döda eller?
Ja, cavolo! Stiamo cercando, stiamo accelerando il passo.
Perché te?
Bamboo.
I became like a Nazi and I was line of content because I used to like became the opposite.
How do you like chosen to go to Bangkok? Well, we luckily. Yeah, yeah.
But I know.
You leave your car here.
Ooh.
She spent 40 quid in HMV as well. Good morning.
事儿吧？你们不会，人家上海才他妈多大，我管人家练。It's all coming. I'm getting flashbacks. Like, look. Look at that, look at that. Three, two, 1, 2, 3, bubble bup. Bubbles rain. Okay, one more time. 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. Let's go, big bubble. Bye bye. See you next time, Bubble. Hey. Okay. 3, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you got
that
it.
bubble for you.
Nearly, Kenny.
Okay.
Something to eat.
I don't know any of them. I don't think a singular coaster counts as much.
Science museum.
Airplanes are only sensitive to going sideways. They're not sensitive to going
I had to.
妈的，是我脚什么？